Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. And a reminder, as we do every week, Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, when we say go green, that's not just some pablum like conservationism. It's deep ecology, a recognition that we're all interconnected. And whether you look at that from a deep eco-spiritual feminist perspective, or you look at it through just the hard science, or like me, you say both of those are completely valid ways to understand the world. The reality is that we are all connected in this web of life, and anything that we do to that web, we do to ourselves. And I also want to say, as we do every week here on Redneck Gone Green, a welcome to my other redneck friend, Shane Knight. Shane, how you doing?
David, I'm doing just peachy. I tell you that. It's a thing to wake up in the morning and feel terrified, angry, resentful, and at the same time overjoyed that winter is nearly done. That's about how I'm doing. So,
But you know what? I got to tell you, Shane, when people say, "How are you?" I always like to separate those two. I say, on a personal level, man, I am mighty fine. I mean, I'm happy, I'm healthy. I'm connected to my junior high school sweetheart who we reconnected now 11, 12 years ago. I start pretty much every day with coffee with her. I got a 100-pound yellow lab that forces my fat ass to get out there and walk. I do meaningful, productive work for which I am appreciated and respected by people I appreciate and hated by both my class enemies and members of my own class who have sadly decided to break fascist. I'm also saying I find that I am irritating liberals by saying some hard truths. So on a personal level, Shane, every single box is ticking right on. I'm doing great. And on a big picture level, I'm pretty terrified by what I see happening.
well, you and me both, brother. Um, I wake up telling myself the only thing I can do is it's right here on my desk. Says that every first thing I see every morning. Wake up and be fucking awesome. What that means to me is just to be better than I was yesterday. But I tell you, it's getting a little bit hard to find the compassion and empathy that I feel like some of our fellow countrymen deserve, and at the same time, some of them just really deserve a swift kick in the you know where.
Yeah,
But that being
that's
said,
exactly right. And hey, you know what? I got to say, because we have a great audience here on Redneck Gone Green, and I'm on this the comment section right now, and I just want to lift up Minute Media, who just said Redneck was already green and pro-worker if you know the history of the labor battle in West Virginia, and of course they're talking about Blair Mountain and the single largest people's uprising since the Civil War, an armed struggle by redneck coal miners against the Pinkertons and the gun thugs. So thank you, Minute, for lifting that up. I also want to say, Shane, before, like, we got a great program that I want to, I'm looking forward to bringing Jonathon and Miki'ala on. But before we do, can you throw up that tweet that you and I talked about just before we got on here? Because I want to actually make a point about this. And while Shane brings it up, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, what we're throwing up is Elon Musk's response to Donald Trump. Donald Trump literally wrote, y'all, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." That was February 15th. That was just 2 days ago. I want to be clear about something. That is misattributed, and I think I misattributed it myself. People typically associate that with Napoleon, but the point is, it is basically a claim that there is nothing illegal about doing anything that he as president does to, quote, save his country. This is a clear indication of a dictator and he is testing the waters. So that's horrific enough, Shane. But I want to point out that Elon Musk responds at 1414 with 14 flags. Why am I bringing up that? Because the so-called 14 words is a reference to slogans originated by the American domestic terrorist David Eden Lane, who was one of the founding members of a white supremacist terrorist group called The Order. And the primary slogan in 14 words is this, quote, We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. End quote. Lane also used 1488 in his manifesto. The phrasing continuously has been used as a sly, not so subtle head wink to specific white supremacists, Nazis, and fascists. So Shane, I'm just here to tell you, I knew about those 14 words. As soon as I saw those 14 flags, I knew exactly what Elon Musk was trying to communicate.
Well, I'm glad you're on Twitter because I sure as hell can't stand it. It makes me sick, and I regret eating the sauteed spinach I did 2 hours ago because I almost felt it again. I can't believe they're so brazen with this. They're out there doing it in plain sight, and it is the echo chamber of Twitter that I've seen lately has been nothing but white supremacist and Aryan nation diatribe babble, I guess is the best thing I could put it. It's just it's horrifying. We as a country should all be ashamed that not only that our I have a hard time saying what I'm about to say, but our president elect is actually saying and then supplanted by his billionaire cronies. It's terrifying, and you know, I keep thinking of that illustration of the tighter they close their fists, the more things to squeeze through their fingers. And right now, I feel like I've squeezed through the fingers, and I know there's a whole bunch of people out there watching this and listening to this that probably feel the same way and ready to do something about it.
Well, right on. Thank you, Shane. And I do want to let Dave Petrovich, who was a long time and still follows us. Dave, we are now on Democracy at Work's YouTube channel live. So the Redneck Gone Green YouTube channel will continue to operate. It'll be where our reels are posted. We'll be posting the recorded versions of this. But if you want to join the conversation live on YouTube, go to the Democracy at Work YouTube channel. That's where we are. And with that, Shane, I'm itching to bring our two guests in because I want to hear what they have to say about my diatribe or our diatribe for the first 5 minutes of this program. Our guests today on Redneck Gone Green are Jonathon Freeman and Miki'ala Catalfano. They are both co-founders of Native Roots Network. I'm going to be very transparent and say these are very dear and cherished friends of mine. They are personal friends, but they're also colleagues and comrades. These are people who were doing the work on the ground, just over the mountain from me, by the way. They in Shasta County. So Miki'ala, Jonathon, welcome to Redneck Gone Green.
Thanks for having us.
So looky here, I'm just going to ask either one of you, because y'all both know me, and I know that I can sometimes come on a little strong. So I'm going to actually do a gut check with y'all, because I know you're in Shasta County, and I know Shasta County is redneck country, and I know because I've been there many times myself, and I've actually had some really good conversations with some folks up there, and these are folks that in many respects culturally are my people. But I also know that y'all are making international news with the elected officials that y'all got there, right wingers that they are. So really, for true, like what the heck is happening in Shasta County, and are y'all seeing the same kind of stuff that you've just heard Shane and I lament on what we're seeing on Twitter?
You know, I think for us here in Shasta County, it's a mixed bag, man. It's a different, interesting time because I think what we are dealing with here, just like you said, I grew up here with the rednecks. You know, maybe a little bit of a redneck myself, so to speak. And we have a culture of country, and what that looks like in different ways comes in different forms, right? So there are elements of white supremacy here, but I think there's also a lot of good working folks that are feeling the precarity and the the pressures of the moment, right? So this whole thing with a billionaire celebrating white supremacy in this particular way is really an interesting space because I don't know that folks know how to deal with a billionaire, because there's also a class element here for many folks. They don't trust the elite, which is one reason why they like Trump, because they, that whole persona that he somehow, snake charms folks and make them think that he's not a billionaire, or he's down with the working man. But I don't think that Elon Musk has the same ability to sell himself here in that same way. So it's a real interesting, nuanced kind of approach that we have to take as we do our analysis in this space. But as I'm jumping right in, I just want to say I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and really, glad to be here and share a little bit about what we're trying to do here in far northern California. We're located here in Wintu territory, and just kind of an honor. It's an honor to be part of the larger picture of trying to create solutions for this time, in this place, in this whole configuration and mess that we're in. So yeah, just wanted to say give our appreciation. And I definitely want to share that space with Miki'ala too, because without Miki'ala, we wouldn't be getting very far. So Miki'ala.
Well, let's bring Miki'ala Catalfano into this conversation.
Well said, Jonathan. And really, I think, what's important for me is paying attention to those times when there are overlap with folks who you might think like they're going to be some way, and then they actually really turn out to be rural people who care about community. And I think that's the area where I'm focusing my energy. Certainly all those other things are not false, but I think that those might be a very vocal majority, and that here in Shasta County we have a lot of folks who they believe in community, and partially I would imagine due to us surviving some major fire events for multiple years, that we understand the areas where we can come together. And that is not taking away the fact that we're watching things that are happening nationally, internationally, and fully aware of, frankly, the manipulation of people, and the manipulation of, to Jonathan's point, of folks who are feeling that they didn't get their American dream, and what the heck, and someone's telling them, oh, it's because of that person or that person, or that community, when really it's not. So
Miki'ala,
yeah, that's what I would
I'm
say.
so grateful for both you and Jonathan for reminding us. And, like part of the reason that this program, I named it Redneck Gone Green, is because I want to reclaim what a redneck is. Because, I did grow up country, and, I know you did too, Jonathan. For me, part of what being country is that you take care of your neighbor, and your neighbor takes care of you. Right? Like there is a sense of community that comes out of being country. And I'll be honest, y'all, it kind of pisses me off that these like right-wing zealots have somehow claimed that idea. So I'm trying to take it back. Like, so to me, I could go into any pool hall or bowling alley in Shasta County, California, and within 5 minutes, I guarantee you I could get folks riled up about the boss man with his boot on our neck, and these rich, pointy-headed folks who are taking advantage of us. I can stoke class resentment like that to anybody in Shasta County. And the fact is, I have seen some of y'all's folks in Native Roots Network rolling up in the same Carhartt gear that my redneck folk do. So let's not get it twisted, right? Like there's not a whole lot of difference between the country Wintu folk and the country white folk,
Except the history, but yes.
There you go.
That's a big part of it,
right? That's the complication of it. It depends on where you're starting the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so my challenge is, how can we confront that history, be honest about it, and ensure that history need not be our future? So with that, I'm going to actually take a step back and ask y'all to explain what Native Roots Network is, and in that introductory conversation, situate it for us in Wintu territory, Yana territory. Why is that so important?
I went first last time, Miki'ala. Why don't you take this, and then I'll follow up.
All right. Well, Native Roots Network really was born out of a need, and it was a need to find different ways for Indigenous youth. Many of the stats that others around the country experience in Native communities that have been systematically underdeveloped, include some things like suicide and a lot of the negatives that it's not really telling the whole story of Native people. And so part of the desire was for us to offer opportunity for our youth. And then the other opportunity was to tell our own story and to talk about the things that exist still in our communities, our reciprocity with Mother Earth, some of the traditions that actually, if you look back far enough, we're all fairly land-based people. It's just how far removed are you from your own community behaving in that way? And so multiple things, being able to help our youth, being able to help our whole community. And that's been something that we've been focusing on because we do believe, I'm from Hawaii, and there's a word, kako, and in Hawaiian, that means all of us. The reality is it's going to require all of us to be able to address the poly crisis that we're currently facing. And that also includes the social fragmentation and really the pitting of us against the other, when really, those are some of the things that we're thinking about when we are doing arts and culture events, when we're doing ceremonial runs or doing workshops so people know how to actually use the plants that are here and at our disposal for our health and our benefit. So Jonathon, I'm sure I've missed some things, but is there anything that you would add to that?
I think we've been around for like 20 years and in different configurations and different emphasis. When we started with the Native Youth Cultural Exchange, which was taking young men from our community to learn from different cultural revitalization efforts in Hawaii and Hopi, and having young men from Hopi and Hawaii all travel together and thinking about, for us, culture as a grounding point. It's a serves as an inoculation, and it's a reminding of how we are supposed to be in this world, which includes, like, I think, which one of the things that we come right up with the solidarity economy type of a realm is like collective action, collective thinking, collective being. Those are all some of the different ways that we remember when we are practicing our culture. And from that leadership experience to art and culture, reclaiming spaces, activating spaces with the ways that we want to express ourselves through culture, work protecting sacred sites, supporting language revitalization, protecting land and period, just generally. And just some of that work. But part of the thing for us is that's been really like campaign focused, or what you might say like episodic events. And once we were done, even if we got folks fired up about culture or the young people really moved, part of the thing is that we're still like surrounded by this whole colonial capitalist system. So you might help some young person get all the way through high school. You're doing all the things that they're supposed to do, then only, to go get a job at Taco Bell or Subway sandwich and be exploited and extracted from. So we really wanted to like make the shift. And then these last couple years, we've gone from this idea of that form of cultural revitalization to a need and a desire to really provide for the material needs of our community. And not just our community, not to be like parochial, like it's only for Native people, but for us, we see our culture and our way of living in balance with the earth as our guiding force. And so as part of our culture, like we want to be strong as a center, as a hub for that, but then also we have concentric rings of relationship. We understand that we are all in the same boat, so we have to, we're not going to survive this alone. So we're really working across cultures, across races to really bring folks in who are interested in building a new world, and I think one of the things for our area is that, you know, we haven't had historically since probably, you know, labor movements of the dam, building the dam, which is really kind of this interesting uh, contradiction or conflict for us. You know, the Shasta Dam was one of the largest last public works projects that brought many folks out here. But it also was another form of genocide where it flooded into homelands on that side of the, you know, the rivers. So, um, you know, that hasn't been a necessarily a history that we celebrate, but to understand that that was probably like the last strong movement of some of those workers in this area. So now in this new form, we're trying to rebuild some of those relationships with folks who are like-minded, who want to do something good for all, and you know, really again looking for us. We've developed what we call our economics development framework, because we're kind of rejecting economic development because that's been so hijacked and captured by capitalism. We don't want to use that word economics. We can go to the Greek origins of it and all that kind of stuff. Yes, we understand that's managing home, but we want to refer to economics. And behind me, you have some of these oak trees out here. And for us in this region, acorn has been like a main staple. And in this time, which is like I think really indicative of the moment that we're living in, the oak trees are not being taken care of. They're actually, and you know, a lot of the acorns get this infestation of moths that not only make the acorn not good to eat, but they can't even plant and reseed new oak trees. So through this whole piece here, we're looking at how do we, like literally and metaphorically, reestablish our connection with the earth so that we're taking care of the land. Because we understand when we take care of the land, or in this particular case, take care of that oak tree is going to produce more acorns. And when that acorn is a better crop, then we're going to actually be healthier. That's a complex carbohydrate, and it's finding all these different things about reversing the effects of diabetes, disease. So we understand that reciprocal relationship. And so we use that as our I guess you could say our North Star, our light, understanding whatever we choose to do moving forward, we need to be in balance with the earth, and it needs to be an action that's going to be enhancing the earth so that we can optimize our existence for abundance, not just for us right now, but moving forward into the future generations.
So, Miki'ala, I'm curious, again, I know you both, and we've done a lot of work together over many years. But I still remember the first time that I heard the two of y'all begin to describe what I know as the solidarity economy framework as acornomics. And it really landed for me because what I realized is, oh, snap, my friends, we are talking about the same thing, but we're using we're using different words because we're coming at it from different cultural expectations. So I know, Miki'ala, for you as a native Hawaiian, that you come at this from yet another kind of perspective. So I'm curious, whenever you talk about acornomics, how do you sort of communicate that this is just a way of taking care of ourselves and of each other and of the land?
I think what I would reference is in Hawaii, we have an ahupua'a system, and that is, basically a watershed, and it's everything from the mountain all the way to the sea, and that there's this reciprocity that happens in the communities that live along that watershed, and that it really takes care of everything. It takes care of the people who work in the forest, then we'll trade with the folks who are down by the sea, and vice versa, all along that watershed. But then it also takes care of the ecosystem itself. And so, like, when I first heard solidarity economy, I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like ahupua'a, and it definitely has what I was referring to earlier, is that kako, all of us reference. And so, let's face it, Native people, maybe others would say it differently, but we code talk and we use whatever is. I will use whatever words will help me to communicate with others and bring them along and with. So I think Ahupua'a kind of names it for me. Of course, I grew up there, but that is alive and well in a different form here in Northern California. That's what I'd say about solidarity economy.
Jonathan, I'm dropping into the chat for those who are following along live on YouTube at Democracy at Work. Something I got off of y'all's website, that Acornomics is an indigenous economic model inspired by traditional ecological knowledge and sustainable resource management. And so I'm going to invite y'all to explain what TEK is and why it's so critical to what y'all do at Native Roots Network.
So TEK stands for Traditional Ecological Knowledge. And, I think one of the things that's really so important about TEK is that you have basically R&D that took place here on this land, or our R&D, for thousands of years. So there's an acute depth of knowledge in. One of the things is, like, we could actually look at fire as one of the species, or one of the not the indicators, excuse me, one of the elements of this place that's actually shaped and formed. So since the last ice age, Native people have been here pruning, cutting, burning. So the forest that settlers came in and saw wasn't wilderness. It was actually well maintained. It was actually manicured by Native people, by Native people's management. And so with the suppression of fire, with the whether that's wildfire or the elimination of traditional burning practices, we've actually created a tinderbox. And then you couple that with things like climate crisis. We have like these explosive fire conditions like the park fire, or what we recently saw down in Southern California. And so for us, understanding that those traditional practices is a starting point for us to go back to what was known, reclaim that, come back to the land, restore, repair, and then also then getting back into a process of research, right, and observation, because we know some of the things are different. Just like the invasive grasses that actually have permeated like the soil everywhere around, like that has a different relationship with fire than the old style bunch grasses. So we have to actually, like, this isn't just enough to know what was once the practice. We actually need that as a starting point so we can build forward. So that's a little bit about TEK, and I think that's just part of like one of the elements that we're looking at, understanding our own needs to, again, provide for the folks. So TEK is one avenue when we're looking at land restoration to bring young people in. We talked about the leadership program that we had in the past, and what we're looking forward to building is another workforce development. We'll use that language, but to bring folks in hands on the land so they get some confirmation and affirmation of our cultural practices as they're actually earning an income, as we're actually taking care of Mother Earth. And then part of the thing that we're looking at too is the formation of a digital fabrication lab where we can actually use the materials that right now a lot of the practices with land management is that they either chip it, burn it, or do something with it that's just it's seen as waste when you have to cut and prune. But we actually want to make things that are useful and kind of get ourselves out of the reliance on Home Depot and all those other things, so that we can start to form our own localized production here.
So, one thing I want to make sure that we lift up is at Native Roots Network, y'all, the phrase land back is powerful and it has been gaining momentum. And the reality is y'all are putting that into practice in a pretty remarkable way. So, Miki'ala, I'm wondering if you want to talk about a couple of the big projects that I know y'all are successfully navigating now.
Well, there's land back for, hey, at the very base of it is we need land to do the work that we're working on doing. But the reality here too is with the history of this place, we have been able to get land back within a footprint of what had been an area that was promised to Wintu and other people in the 1800s. And so yes, we're doing traditional ecological knowledge. Yes, we are looking at community production, but part of it is also a bit of justice and taking back, not taking back, because frankly, we've had to buy back, just like anybody else in a capitalist system, and that sucks.
Oh.
But having that land base is just like the very foundational thing that we needed in order to begin the work that really started 20 years ago. It just took us a while to understand, like, we need to, as Jonathan said, provide for the material needs of the community. And frankly, having hands on the land has a healing effect for everyone. I think, weapons of mass distraction, television, WWF, and all those different things, or Marvel, if you want to get up into the modern times. I think people actually are starved for touching the earth, for being out on the land, for listening to the birds, and the things that you can get there and glean there just by being outside too. I don't know if I answered your question, but it made me go off on a tangent. So.
Well, one thing I do want to make sure, because there are actually 2 parcels that now Native Roots Network has. I know, let's start with the one that where y'all are already developing a community resilience center. So let's start at that first one, and then we can go into the second one. So Jonathan, you want to jump in on?
So as we're jumping, into like the part of rematriation. That's the term that we've been using, to rematriate the land. Because us guys, let's take our our share of the blame here for the jacked up situation that our planet's in. The patriarchy, and then the displacement of women as leaders, as clan mothers, all of those different, whether that's even in Europe with the medicine women of the old witches, right? Like, we've done a pretty good job messing things up. And so for us, part of this is the idea of how do we rematriate the land? How do we bring that back into the feminine and that kind of sensitivity? I have to check myself about like how we manage the stuff all the time, because I still have kind of like, a particular approach to managing the land. See, I'll even use that language. So that first place, though, we were, as we came into that realization over the last few years, we had this opportunity. This opportunity presented itself to us downtown. It's kind of a joke there, but downtown Bella Vista. And there was a piece of property that came up for sale that has a bust up old mobile and an old bust up shop. And it's about 4 acres. But we saw there really the potential to create a community center in an area that doesn't have any public space, except maybe even the elementary school playground now gets locked up, so there's not even a Grange Hall, so to speak. It's a Dollar General and, a couple mini marts and a gas station. That's it. But what we've experienced here is an ever increasing amount of crisis and emergencies, whether that's been the planned power outages by the power company to avoid starting fires, or the fires that get started, the evacuations, extreme heat, extreme smoke. And then even in the winter, sometimes we just had flooding a couple weeks ago, as well as some heavy snows that have knocked out power and blocked roads and took trees down. People don't have anywhere to go. And so we've been really looking at and following the model of the Community Resiliency Center, thinking about a place that we have a community center all the time, but a resiliency hub and an emergency place in times of crisis and need. So folks could come down. We're designing and planning a center where they will have backup power, battery power. So, you can come down and charge your battery pack. So, grandma can plug in her CPAP machine. We want a place where there's Wi-Fi available. When there was a fire here a couple of years ago, that mini mart parking lot, like, I kid you not, looked like grapes of wrath. There were old trucks with goats tied to the back of it because people had nowhere to go. They had no information about what the current conditions were, and they had no way of really getting a hold of folks that they needed to get a hold of. And so we could be helping the general community in those times of emergency, right? And that's a different form of solidarity. But as we're all being abandoned by federal government, especially now, state government shortages, all of those things, like, we see the disasters are outpacing the ability for the state to actually respond to them. And that's where community comes in. So that's that 4.5 acres. And that's a place that we call Okulus, which is the granary. So following that whole theme about the acorns, the granary in the old times was Okulus was where you would gather the acorns in the fall, and then you could store them year round, so that you could resource the community, the village, year round. And we see Okulus being situated in that same way. this last few months, we've been actually closing another deal as these opportunities arise, like another one does, and you're almost, oh my gosh, I'm not even ready for this, but we need to do this. A larger piece of land that's just a little bit north of Oculus, where there's already some infrastructure that's in place where we can actually begin to build things like our digital fabrication lab. There's a space where we can meet and have meetings. We were holding meetings in that bus old shop, but when it was about 30 degrees and everybody is having to stand on the, in the folding garden lawn chairs and wrap themselves in blankets so we could meet there in November, it was getting pretty tough. But this new place to us, it's Wenham Post, which means the middle place, which is a reference to a traditional village site that's nearby. And Wenham Post is the place that we really feel that we can really, again, come back into balance with the land so that we can be really advancing that economic framework and move things in a way that we can be more self-sustained and more independent. And we're in a tricky space with that, right? Because as Miki'ala mentioned, like we had to actually go through a process of purchasing this. And so there's a whole thing where, we're able to access some movement money that's helping us buy time, but now we got to pay that off, right? So in this space, this is we're in this area where there's 35 square miles of land that was promised to Wintu and Yana people in the Treaty of 1851 that was never ratified. And so we're in this point in time where we actually, in order to get land back, you have to buy it back. This was land that was promised and then stolen, right? On top of genocide. And I mentioned the histories. So some of the families here are the descendants of families that were part of the genocide. Some were actually folks that maybe didn't take part in that. But in this particular area, where these two properties are, is at the northern end of after the Treaty of 1851, you can go up to 1864, where there's a couple of settler women were killed, and a posse was formed that was hell bent on executing and murdering every Indian that they could find. By that point, many people were working for ranches as maids, cooks, ranch hands, farm hands. Like they were wearing denim jeans and out there in the field speaking English. And this posse went ranch to ranch and executed them. Men, women, and children. There's graphic detail of a 12-year-old girl who was called outside and and they executed her. So that's the history. But on the northern end of that, Oculus sits. And just beyond Oculus, there are a few more homesteads. All these different connections that we have. I had a coworker who one day we were just talking about the homesteads unrelated to this property before we actually were able to secure this property. And he told the story of like, oh, he knew I was part of the Native community. We're talking about his family's homestead somewhere out in this area. And he said, yeah, we're looking for it. I haven't been out there in a while. And he knew I was part of the Native community. So he told the story. But yeah, I guess there's this one time where the family heard that there's a posse that was going around, was trying to kill all the working hands on all the ranches, all the Indians. So we got word beforehand, and we told them so they could run up into the canyons and hide before that posse got there. So what we learned by looking at the map, understanding where that homestead is, understanding the lay of the land where we are, those canyons that he's referring to are the canyons that make up the property here. So those folks fled genocide, fled ethnocide, murder, execution, ran up into this place seeking refuge. And we see this place now as a refuge once again, So that's part of for us, all of these things are happening on many, many levels and many like this historical, this healing level, and then also like the strategic level of what we need to do to build forward. And that's all, all wrapped up into our story. So yeah, so now we're in this whole this next kick of how do we, while the world is coming undone with all the different nuttiness that's coming out of Captain Chaos and the merry men of billionaire crew, how are we going to actually complete the purchase, right? How are we going to build the capital that we need just so that we can get this done, so that we can move forward to be the example, to be an example of a solution in this time? That's our challenge, and that's where we are as we enter 2025. That's our project 2025. Let's take that back Well, we're like, it's time, and we're thinking about like the solidarity kind of those frameworks help us, right? Because there's tools in there, whether that's land trust, whether that's worker cooperatives, whether that's these different ways of naming these structures in this contemporary time as we bring forward our traditional values and understanding.
Miki'ala, thank you so much, Jonathan. I want to bring you into this conversation to
Mate,
actually talk about some of
mate's been really
your.
good.
I'm sorry.
Although the mate tea's been kicking in all of a sudden, so
Miki'ala, I know that you have done some work as an artist and a storyteller using the visual framework about Winnemtoth. And I'd love to hear you describe what some of your vision for this 1,200 acres. And again, I do want to underscore this land was stolen, then it was promised back, it was reneged, and then it is really offensive to me to just, as a storyteller, to acknowledge that it had to be bought back after it was stolen and then promised and not. And so, like the like I often say, we have to confront our history, and it's brutal, it's horrific, it's disgusting. But our history need not be our future if we have the courage to confront it, and then to move forward together. And Miguel, I don't want to put you on the spot, but your vision and y'all's vision collectively at Native Roots Network for what's going to happen there, I think, is the kind of story that we desperately need to hear. So I'm going to ask you to walk us through some of the ideas that y'all have on those 1,200 acres.
So imagine you come on to the 1,200 acres, and you might be someone who's working in your community, but you're going to come here and you're going to learn about what we're doing. And that's part of what helped us to get to where we are now. Is we went out to go and see in Hawaii one of the some of the things that they're doing, but also going to other communities in Virginia and in Humboldt, all these other places where people are doing that work. And we want to be a place where others can come and we can be a model for what we've learned, what we're continuing to learn. So you could come here. You could have a gathering here of other movement folks who are trying to do similar things in their community. Or if you were a community member, you could come here and you could learn how to actually gather, how to appropriately store and process acorn and use that. And so that you could be able to take care of the acorns that are growing in your own yard, but you could learn that here. You could also be here working together. There's something really powerful about working together, whether you're clearing brush or you're painting the side of a community center, and really practicing being in community together, which is very different. It's not transactional, it's so relational. And some of that practical being together as a community, everything from eating and, like I said, working together. But like when I really see it, I see that there's art, I see that there's canoe carving, I see people building and creating things. When we talk about going out on the land for doing TEK work, whether that's reducing fuels, but coming back with some of those materials, what can we make in a digital lab using those things? I know others have been experimenting with that in Michigan and other areas, and we want to be able to not just take and burn and be done with it, but what can we actually make utilitarian things that the community already needs? And like Jonathan was saying, lessen the need for you to go and buy that at Lowe's or wherever. We can make so much of what we actually need, and practicing those kinds of things. So I think that, and then also a place to be physical, frankly. Put away the phone on the TV and get out on the land. Access to land is a big thing. I think I'd heard it, people talking about how they've gone on to gather, basket makers and things, and how they've been harassed because people had a notion that they were up to something that they shouldn't be doing. What are you picking those plants for? Well, they're really, basket makers are like the original TEK people. And I would probably say that that's the truth for lots of folks who use those natural materials for whatever it is they're doing, even beyond basket makers. So I can see these people being out interacting with the land, with each other in a way that's very different than how I think we've all been, socialized to be individuals. I see it as community. And that also it's not a big old romantic thing like we're all going to get along great. It's also um, remembering and practicing those ways of handling conflict in ways that help us remain in relationship. And it's not a matter of this call out culture or cancel culture. It's really remembering some of those kinds of traditional things that existed in my community but also exist elsewhere, so that we can be in right relationship, not just with the land but with each other. And those are some of the things that I can see when you come out here at Wanamtos.
Thank you for saying that too, because one of the things that I had the good privilege and fortune to have an Indigenous elder remind me, and I try to hold this in my heart and say it to other people, is a reminder that every human being on Mother Earth today descends from Indigenous people. I'm going to say that again because it's so critically important. Every single human being alive today descends from Indigenous peoples. Now, some folks like Jonathon and Miki'ala are more closely tied to that. It is a much fresher, more immediate history for Indigenous folks. My ancestors were last in right relation in both Scotland and Ireland, and then the English Empire. And as y'all both know, I never say English Empire without spitting, because I hate the English Empire. Not English people, but the English Empire. The English Empire forced my ancestors off of their ancestral homeland where they were in right relation. My ancestors came to this continent, Turtle Island, and then forced people off of their ancestral homeland, traumatizing them. So there's plenty of trauma to go around, right? Like there's just trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And that's not to excuse anything, that's to name it. But our job, I genuinely believe, is to remember that we are supposed to be in right relation with each other and with Mother Earth. That is, and I have to work harder at it because it's further away in the echoes. But as an Indigenous leader told me, David, it's still in your DNA. And so that's the challenge that I have. I am supposed to be living in right relationship with not just other humans, but with all of life. I am supposed to be in this sacred reciprocal relationship with my cousins, the bear, and my cousins, the salmon, and my second cousin, the redwood trees, right? And that's been stolen from me. And, it kind of makes me pretty angry when I think about the fact that that's what I'm supposed to be allowed to have. That's how I'm supposed to be living, and I'm not. And so I'm committed to trying to do the work, including here on Redneck Gone Green, to remember and help other people remember. We're not trying to create a new world per se. We're trying to remember our way back to the world that existed before the enclosure movement, before capitalism, before feudalism. That's what we all deserve.
Yeah. And I think, I would like to add too that this isn't necessarily like airy fairy kind of stuff, right? Yeah. I was just thinking about, sometimes people think about, our relation to the bear, or the different animals and plant, like salmon, like they're delicious too, right? Like, so it's like finding our place in here, right? It's like but it's being in balance. I mean, the bear's gonna eat a salmon, they might be, hey, you're my relative, well, I'm gonna eat you, so it's like there's still a relationship with that. I did see a question here that I wanted to jump, just kind of to offer a little bit of the discussion. There's somebody asked here about how do we convince fellow working class people to take time from selling their labor to provide for their families to participate in this program. And that is like an excellent question, because that is actually one of the biggest challenges. And that's part of the lift that we're trying to make right now, is to get to a place where we can actually be, a place where folks can be contributing their labor and then also be receiving in that relationship, right? So that we're we have a lot of underemployment here. There's a lot of our folks who are just barely getting by, and they're lucky if they know their schedule's Sunday night. So it's like that's a serious challenge, and we continue what we do is that we just continue to move forward. Who can make it can make it. We just had like a whole little work party on Saturday, and it's we're getting ready for summer, so we have to like clear the brush, and we make a space open for everybody to come. When they can give, they can give, and when they can't make it, there's no shame, there's no shade, right? There's no like, hey, where were you? And in that way, we're really making sure like the relationships are strong, that we're coming together in a way that supports each other on a core level, so that way you make it when you can make it, because we're all trying to get free together. And that's I think a real challenge for us to build movement, but that's a real challenge that we're addressing.
I have one question. Well, first off, I want to thank you both for not only the work that you are doing, but also for taking the time to come speak with us here today. I was blown away, fascinated, moved almost to tears at the sense of solidarity and community and the commitment and dedication you both have throughout this project. It's fucking amazing. My hat's off to you. We will do everything we can to help get the word out, so you have the money you need to get the land that you need to continue doing the work that you're doing. I want to know if this idea has been picked up by any other groups, that there's some sort of national coordination happening anywhere, or any plans for that down the road.
You want me to take that, Miki'ala? So
I was just putting it out to whoever.
Yeah, she's all laughing. And I was like, I'm gonna be chill. I'm not gonna get all wound up, and I got all wound up so far. So maybe I'll just continue my whine. So we're part of as far as Indigenous folks, right? So there's an Indigenous movement. There's different manifestations of this throughout. This summer, we actually took David on a trip to go learn about some of the different models in Hawaii. So there's different manifestations of the way folks are coming together, again, through culture, through different aspects of political configuration, again, working to get free from a cultural grounding point. There's folks in Muskogee community that's working to be a self-sustained community. There's folks all over doing different points of this work. Whether or not we're all together in as part of a consolidated kind of movement, maybe not. But the thing that we have is like a universal support for each other. Like, I don't necessarily need to be on the daily, weekly meeting with these folks, but I know that there's folks holding it down in that community, right? And I know that there's folks over here holding it down. And we understand, again, as just like I was saying earlier, like culture is like for us the roots of collective living. And I think like Vine Deloria talks about the difference between Western society and Indigenous societies. Again, gross generalizations, but there's a rights-based society that Western, liberalism presents, and then there's also a collective responsibility society that, and many Indigenous communities really embody. And so when we can be in our culture and have that kind of relationship, then that's a foundation for all of this other work in whatever form it's going to take and manifest. So kind of, I don't know if I'm listening to the answer there. It's yes, but in different ways, right? It's kind of like hundreds monkey kind of thing going on. Yeah.
Well, it's like we're going to have all of this in place, like you said, Jonathan. The safety nets, social safety nets, regulations, and all of it falling before our eyes and coming undone. And it's going to be all up to us to take care of one another, and helping other people understand that is going to be crucial if we are going to make it through this horrific upheaval time of orange Cheeto dust falling everywhere.
Well,
yeah, and I just want to say too, just to add to what Jonathan said and to your question, I hope there are others who, whatever little bits that they can take from us or anybody else, please grow it and please make it happen in your community. Because like Jonathan was saying, you know, whether we're out in ceremony and we're like, it's funny because like a lot of communities will say we're the center of the world, and it's true. And then the next community say we're the center of the world, and it's true. And I look at it in a way like it's like an upena, like a net, and we're all like these little knots in that net. And I also want to, you know, shout out to our folks. We're part of a national consortium, People's Network for Land and Liberation. And I think that those kinds of national connections, and then, you know, from there, it's like a Calgon commercial. Sorry, I just said something commercial. But, you know, like, please take the ideas and use them in your community, because we need that. We need to be those little knots in the net across the world.
Well, you know, I'm reminded of the phrase that I first learned in the anti-apartheid movement. And the phrase is, each one, teach one. And I have since learned that that phrase originated during the era of the horrific enslavement of Africans here in this country, in the United States. And that as soon as anyone learned, any enslaved African learned how to read or write, it became their responsibility to teach somebody else. The idea was that you had the responsibility to spread that knowledge, and that it was not just a privilege; it was a responsibility that you had. So when I listen to something like this, I enter it with a level of gratitude and humility, but also a recognition that whatever I'm learning, I need to do my best to apply it and to teach others, not to appropriate it, but to say, I need to integrate this into my life. And that's my responsibility. So in that phrase of each one, teach one, that's what I feel like I'm learning from Jonathon and Miki'ala and my dear friends at Native Roots Network, and the friends that you introduced me to in Hawaii, and that we're working with. And I'm looking at the clock, y'all. This hour has just flown by. And so I do want to give first Miki'ala and then Jonathon an opportunity for any closing thoughts here on Redneck Gone Green. So Miki'ala?
Well, I want to say thank you for being a space to open discussion about these kinds of issues. I think that it's important for us, and whatever platforms we have, to be able to proliferate ideas that are going to frankly sustain life. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity. Totally happy to be organizing with you as well, David, and now Shane. And that's what I would have to say.
Jonathon?
I would just say, yeah, I want to give up my appreciation as well, you know, for the opportunity to share a little bit and have discussion. And I also just want to really name that, you know, Miki'ala and I get to be here and be on this show, but there's a whole circle that's making this possible. And this whole circle has been made possible by our ancestors, right? And other people who have done this work. So we're just one little speck in the continuum. And, you know, and we're really trying to be good ancestors ourselves. And, you know, so all of this, we're all in this kind of this journey together, and we really appreciate everyone out there doing good work. And, you know, keep it up, because we need all of us.
Right on. So Jonathon, Miki'ala, thank you again for coming on. Deeply appreciate you both. And I'll actually be talking to y'all in the next couple of days on People's Network for Land and Liberation. So again, sending you both love and appreciation. Aloha.
Aloha.
Looky here, Shane, before we go, I do want to just to have a quick touch base with you, man. How the hell was that, brother?
Well, David, I am, like I put this in the chat. I was really just fascinated and blown away, because what they're doing, the work they're doing about getting back to the roots of what we are and who we can be as a people is so critical and important. And they're doing it with all of their heart. And I can feel the weight of the joy that their ancestors are probably feeling watching this happen. And I'm right there with them. I'm here for it. I'm, like I said to Jonathon, I'm going to do, and Miki'ala, I'm going to do what we can. You know, us at Democracy at Work, we're going to do what we can do to help spread the word about the work that they're doing. And I hope that they are able to relatively quickly get things moving forward so that they can be an example that others can follow, because we desperately fucking need it right now.
Right on. And looky here, Shane, like, we started this conversation with a pretty heavy acknowledgement of fascism and both Donald Trump and Elon Musk's 14 words. I'm really excited to tell folks that next week we're going to have a returning friend to Redneck Gone Green, Shahid Buttar. Shahid is again, a brilliant thinker. He's the former executive director of the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. He worked actively with the American Constitution Society. He's a constitutional scholar. He ran for Congress. He recently wrote, and he writes Chronicles of a Dying Empire. And just today, like earlier this afternoon, he posted on his Substack the following essay titled, "Our Courts Can't Defend Democracy Because the Rule of Law Died Long Before Trump Came to Office." And then he lays out how that happened. So I got to tell you, Shane, I was really excited to say, let's bring Shahid Buttar back on to Redneck Gone Green. We're going to do a deep dive with Shahid. I know you know of Shahid, but I think this will be the first time that you've been in conversation with him. Yes?
It will be. Yes. I'm very much looking forward to it.
That is fantastic. So with that, I want to conclude this because I'm trying to watch the comments. Bofa said, to be honest, this is my first stream. If you put into priority your goals, ecology, anti-fascist, anti-capitalism, I'm going to say it this way, that we follow the no, feel, do model. What we want people to know is that we are in an absolute crisis, a polycentric crisis of ecological collapse, and not just late stage capitalism, but end stage capitalism. We are literally witnessing techno feudalism rise, that we are at a moment of conjuncture. And so we want people to feel a sense of urgency and that there is a path forward. That path forward will not be led by Democrats. It will not be led by Republicans. It's not even going to be led at the electoral level. Ordinary people are going to have to come together and do the work ourselves. And that's what we want people to do. We want people to recognize that there are things that they can do, whether it's worker-owned cooperatives or community land trust or working on public banking or participatory budgeting. I mean, if you keep watching Redneck Gone Green, you are going to have a weekly dose of people on the ground putting into practice a theory of transformational revolutionary change. And with that, Shane, I want to say to you, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be co-hosting this program with you. And I want to give you any final thoughts that you've got, Shane Knight.
Final thoughts for me today. My takeaway from this whole conversation, first and foremost, I want to echo all of your sentiments. I'm very happy to be here. I do think that people should be aware that what we do want to bring to the fore on this show is people and organizations that are doing the work to build their communities, because like I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying it, there is no time like the present to start running towards one another, because that's the only thing that's going to stop this shit. And other than that, I want to just remind everybody to subscribe to the Substack and join us next Monday.
All right, man. Much love to you all. Peace.